Start his day with a pass underneath that's tipped and intercepted.
With the 2024 NFL regular season now behind us, it seems like the ideal time to reflect on which NFL teams, players, and coaches fell flat on their faces and failed to live up to expectations. So, without further ado, how about we dive into the NFL's 10 biggest disappointments of 2024?
Around that Achilles from Keanu Benton. Again, he's pressured, lets it go, and he has a wide open.
San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers were once again a popular pick to win the Super Bowl heading into the season, having fallen just one play short of taking down the Kansas City Chiefs in the big game a year ago. But man, absolutely nothing went right for Kyle Shanahan's group, who brought back the same star-studded core from last year, plus big-name additions like Leonard Floyd and promising rookie Ricky Pearsall. Even before injuries started piling up on the reigning NFC champions, the 49ers never really clicked or really resembled a contender. Incredibly, they were only above 500 twice all season long, that being after Week 1 and following a Week 10 victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You can blame the injury bug all you want, but Christian McCaffrey missed all but 4 games. Jordan Mason did a phenomenal job as Run CMC's understudy before getting hurt as well.
Brandon Ayuk and the 49ers, after all that, staying together, how did this get done?
Fresh off a $120 million contract extension, Brandon Ayuk was averaging 30 less yards per game compared to 2023 before he suffered a season-ending ACL tear. Deebo Samuel regressed big time despite Pearsall, Ayuk, and McCaffrey all missing time and feels like a safe bet to be cut or traded. And despite strong years from Nick Bosa, Leonard Floyd, and Fred Warner, the 49ers defense regressed across the board and never looked like a top 10 group like we're used to seeing. Maybe they shouldn't have fired Steve Wilks after the Super Bowl loss to KC. Injuries, erratic play from the offense and special teams, and inexcusable late-game meltdowns all added up to a last-place finish in the NFC West. Shanahan and GM John Lynch will return in 2025, but there's a lot of roster restructuring to do after this wasted year on the West Coast. Everything about Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets. I don't think it's a stretch to call the 2024 Jets the most overhyped and disappointing teams in NFL history. As difficult as it is to recall, this dysfunctional circus show organization once entered the year with championship aspirations. And it all made sense, too. The Jets went 7-10 with horrible quarterback play in 2022 and 2023. Now with the 4-time MVP returning from a season-ending Achilles tear, how could the Jets not improve and at least be a playoff team? Well, because it's the Jets. That's why. Beloved head coach Robert Saleh was fired after a close Week 5 loss to the Minnesota Vikings in London. A desperate trade for Devontae Adams in October did nothing to jolt the offense, and GM Joe Douglas was fired 6 weeks after Saleh was shown the door. Then, even more embarrassing details regarding ownership, Woody Johnson reportedly vetoed an offseason trade for star wideout Jerry Jeudy because his Madden rating wasn't high enough. Johnson having his sons getting involved in the club's decision-making, Johnson telling the Jets to bench Rodgers. Ugh. Is there anything that we missed? Look, we know it's the Jets, but how did they suck this bad with the roster consisting of Rodgers, Adams, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, CJ Mosley, Quinnen Williams, and Sauce Gardner? Someone, please make it make sense. Kirk Cousins. Cousins was on pace for a career year with the Minnesota Vikings in 2023 before unfortunately suffering a season-ending Achilles tear. Many decided to make a change at QB, making the 4-time Pro Bowler the most sought-after signal caller in free agency. The Atlanta Falcons won the Cousins sweepstakes, signing him to a 4-year deal worth $180 million that included $100 million of it being guaranteed. Having gone 7-10 the year before with lackluster quarterback play, it felt like the arrival of Cousins would finally push a young and talented Atlanta team into contention. But man, Cousins never once looked at home in the Atlanta offense, despite a top-tier offensive line and the talents of Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Darnell Mooney. He went 7-7 as the starting QB and tossed 18 touchdowns against a league-leading 16 interceptions before getting benched. Head coach Raheem Morris decided to give unproven rookie Michael Penix Jr. the starting duties for the final 3 weeks, unable to trust Cousins any further. The 16 picks were a career worst for Cousins, and the 18 touchdowns touchdowns were the fewest for Cousins in a season in which he played at least 14 games. For context, he threw 18 touchdowns in 8 games with Minnesota a year earlier. Atlanta's defense gave its team a chance to win most weeks. The skill position guys in the O-line did their jobs, but Cousins single-handedly ruined this team's chances of contending, all with his uncharacteristically erratic play, and, well, now the Falcons have to prepare to trade or cut the man and take on some hefty dead money fines.
The Atlanta Falcons have selected Michael Penix Jr., the 4th quarterback taken off the board.
I don't know, maybe it's a good thing they used that number 8 pick on Penix Jr. after all. First-year head coaches minus Dan Quinn and Jim Harbaugh. There were 8 new NFL head coaches heading into the 2024 season. Raheem Morris in Atlanta, Dave Canales in Carolina, Antonio Pierce in Vegas, Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers, Jared Mayo in New England, Mike McDonald in Seattle, Brian Callahan in Tennessee, and Dan Quinn in Washington. With the exceptions of Quinn and Harbaugh, who guided their teams to surprise playoff appearances in 2024, the 2024 NFL head coaching hiring cycle looks like a big-time disaster. Raheem Morris was brought in to elevate the Falcons into playoff contenders, and the signing of Kirk Cousins left him with no excuses. Morris's tenure in Atlanta already looks like it'll be as lackluster as his first head coaching stint with the Bucs. Dave Canales' Panthers hardly look any better than they did a year ago. Bryce Young has looked better since regaining his starting job from an injured Andy Dalton, but finishing near the bottom of the standings was not the goal. Not after Canales revived Baker Mayfield's career in Tampa. Antonio Pierce went 5-4 in Vegas as the interim head coach last year, and it was all thanks to that top 10 defense. Well, the Raiders couldn't stop a nosebleed all year, and they finished with their worst record since 2018, the year that John Gruden was basically tanking. Jared Mayo is not exactly Bill Belichick, but at least Drake May has shown some promise. But man, all those fire Mayo chants in Gillette Stadium do not paint a pretty picture for this once proud franchise. Mike McDonald was brought in to improve Seattle's defense and get them back into the playoffs after a disappointing 9-8 season with Pete Carroll. The defense was a mess for 9 weeks and only showed signs of life after their Week 10 bye, and that was thanks to a soft second-half schedule. Oh, and Seattle missed the playoffs in consecutive years for the first time since 2008 and 2009. Brian Callahan was supposed to save Will Levis and get the most out of a rebuilt Tennessee offense. Well, the Titans finished last in the AFC South and with their worst record since 2015. Oh man, for the sake of good, quality football product, let us hope that the 2025 NFL head coaching hiring cycle goes much better than this year. The Miami Dolphins offense. The Dolphins rode the league's second-best offense in 2023 to a second straight playoff appearance. Mike McDaniel's group averaged 29.2 points per game, with Tyreek Hill's 1,799 receiving yards and 13 touchdowns leading the league. Raheem Mostert had a career-high 1,012 rushing yards and a league-leading 18 rushing scores. Jalen Waddle crossed 1,000 yards receiving for the 3rd straight year, and Devon Achane had 997 yards of offense and 11 total touchdowns despite missing 6 games. The career year from Tua Tagovailoa led to a 4-year extension worth $212.4 million, a clear-cut indicator that it was time for Miami to start winning playoff games. But even if you take away the games Tagovailoa missed with a concussion, man, this Miami offense never looked like the well-oiled machine that took the league by storm last year. Hill's yards per game total dropped by close to 50%. Mostert became a total afterthought in the offense. Achane didn't take that monster step forward that we had expected, and Waddle also endured a disappointing season for his standards and failed to hit 1K receiving for the first time in his entire career. Hard to fully analyze and critique Tagovailoa's play since, well, he missed close to half the season. But we will say that his 2024 campaign would have been way better if Miami's big 4 skill position guys played up to their usual standards. Not saying Miami should have been a playoff team or anything, but man, you don't go from the number 2 offense to, well, essentially a bottom 10 unit in just 1 year. That is crazy. Cleveland Browns. The Browns rode a stingy defense and a Comeback Player of the Year award-winning season from Joe Flacco to the playoffs last year. Having finished 11-6 to lock down just their second postseason appearance since 2003, expectations were pretty dang high for Kevin Stefanski's group in 2024. At the very least, the Browns should have stuck around in the playoff race and maybe pushed for double-digit wins, even in the unforgiving AFC North. Or, so we thought. Deshaun Watson somehow played even worse than the unwatchable 2023 version of himself before suffering a season-ending Achilles rupture. Cleveland's usually stout offensive line suddenly forgot how to block, leading to a significant drop in production from the usually dangerous ground game. Jameis Winston and Dorian Thompson-Robinson did nothing to improve the offense following Watson's injury. And Jim Schwartz's defense was out of sync all year long and would have been much worse without another stellar year from Myles Garrett. But other than that, and a last place finish in the AFC North, I guess 2024 wasn't so bad for the Browns. Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars offense. Now, we're not saying the Jaguars were like a Super Bowl contender heading into 2024, but they were supposed to at least compete for a postseason berth. As bad as last season's collapse was, they still went 9-8 and nearly boasted a top 10 offense. So, despite the sour end of 2024, the Jaguars got overly excited and gave Trevor Lawrence a massive 5-year contract extension worth $275 million, including $200 million being guaranteed. So Lawrence at least had to continue playing like a top 15 QB to justify that deal. And come on, how could he mess up with Travis Etienne Jr., Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, Brian Thomas Jr., and Gabe Davis as his weapons? Well, lo and behold, the Jaguars have been completely unwatchable this year. Before suffering a concussion that ended his season, T-Law threw for just 2,045 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. Incredibly, he actually averaged less passing yards per game than his nightmare rookie season under Urban Meyer. But aside from Thomas Jr. and the surprising Tank Bigsby, the rest of the Jags offense was a complete mess. Kirk, Davis, Ingram, and Etienne were practically invisible all season long. Oh, and did we mention that this team was coming off 2 straight winning seasons? Or that T-Law's $275 million extension hasn't kicked in yet? Oh, yikes. Pricey free agents swapping teams. Okay, so we touched a little bit on how disappointing Kirk Cousins has been in Atlanta, but he's not the only pricey free agent who's flopped with his new team. You see, after a career year in Miami in 2023, Christian Wilkins got a 4-year deal worth $110 million with Vegas. Well, he hardly made an impact in the limited action that he saw before suffering a foot injury that kept him out for most of the year. Carolina handed $153 million combined to Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt to only provide minimal upgrades on their O-line. Calvin Ridley was paid superstar money by Tennessee, $92 million over 4 years, to only produce like a number 2 receiver. And man, the Eagles also ought to feel buyer's remorse for giving Bryce Huff $51.1 million over 3 years to get average production. Lloyd Cushenberry, Eric Armstead, Patrick Queen, they've also been mostly disappointments with their respective teams too. Second-year quarterbacks. Now, you could argue that Indianapolis Colts QB Anthony Richardson was deserving of his own entry here, but his fellow sophomore signal callers were disappointing enough to qualify for a combined entry here. Has 2023 first overall pick Bryce Young improved from his awful rookie year? Yeah, sure, especially in the second half, but we still aren't talking about eye-popping numbers, folks, and he is running out of time here to prove himself as the franchise QB. Former second overall pick CJ Stroud played like an MVP in 2023, but his play has regressed big time in 2024, and Houston wouldn't have returned to the playoffs if they didn't play in football's worst division. Richardson has been a complete disaster for the Colts this year. Seriously, he might be the worst starting QB with double-digit starts. Last year's 4th overall pick is facing a make-or-break year in 2025. Last chance, kiddo. Will Levis had Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, Tony Pollard, and briefly DeAndre Hopkins at his disposal under new head coach Brian Callahan. He got benched and was outplayed by veteran backup Mason Rudolph. So Levis too is on his way out. And if you want to go into the later rounds, Dorian Thompson-Robinson in Cleveland, Jake Haener in New Orleans, and Aiden O'Connell in Las Vegas just haven't done anything to show that they're going to be starters in this league. Between that bunch, AOC is the best, and man, he is looking at a career as a backup right now. Dallas Cowboys. We know Cowboys haters are getting a kick out of their 2024 failures, but did you really think that they'd be disappointing this much? Like, man, with 3 straight 12-win seasons under their belts, Dallas was expected to at least be a wild card team. But this team never found its form, with that Week 1 blowout win over Cleveland proving to be merely a mirage. Dak Prescott lost 5 of 8 starts before a season-ending hamstring injury. He had just 11 touchdowns against 8 picks, with the 86.0 passer rating marking his career worst. Brandon Cooks and Jake Ferguson were total non-factors on offense too. After fielding a top 10 defense in 3 straight years under DC Dan Quinn, the Cowboys unit slipped near the very bottom in every major category. If not for Micah Parsons, the stats would be a lot worse. And remember when Dallas went undefeated at home for nearly 2 straight seasons? Well, they didn't get their first win at Jerry World until Thanksgiving against the hapless New York Giants. All of this after Jerry Jones said that his team would be all in during the offseason. Jeez, the joke just kind of writes itself. But hey, who do you think was the biggest NFL disappointment of 2024? Do you agree with our choices? Was there anything that we may have missed? Let us know in the comment section below. If you liked this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps us out a ton. And you know, we really appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, then subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching and we'll see you guys next time.